So allow me to start with my experience from yesterday, and to change the picture, or maybe to share with you the problematic or complicated situation inside Israel, and how sometimes a Knesset member, a parliament member, can be at the same time part of other circles of being Israeli. So yesterday I participated in a drill, in a military drill. I'm Lieutenant Colonel in the Israeli Navy SEALs in a reserve duty service. So I found myself with uniforms, with M16, with my unit behind me, just preparing ourselves to 2 weeks of a drill, or military drill in 1 week from now. Preparing ourselves to military scenarios, military campaign, theoretically. And I'm starting with that because everything here is a mix. Before I joined the politics, I was a columnist in one of the biggest newspapers in Israel. And so I wrote columns about different issues in Israel. One of them was military issues. How to defeat or not defeat Hamas. I'm very proactive, strengthening the ability of Israel to deter small actors in this area. And I always explain to my colleagues from all over the world when they come to Israel that a journalist here or a columnist here has also responsibility for his own words. He can write some recommendations for politicians, go to do this military campaign or stop that or do that, and one day after that he can find himself with uniforms at the military campaign while he's actually part of what he wrote about a few hours ago. So with that starting point, I would like to add some comments to what Bogi Elon said before, and he was my commander in the military when he was chief of staff in Israel, and he is also my party head today. He's actually lead my party in the Knesset. So being relevant, part of it is to understand what kind of wars, specifically here in Israel, but also I think your challenges in the future you will find it. Being relevant is to understand what exactly is to defeat the enemy, what exactly is to win, and how everything connect to politics, to public atmosphere, even to the media. What we know today, part of it is that we are not actually fighting strong actors. It's not the same wars that we knew until 73. That we have enemies, we have a line of a battle, one army defeat the other, and everyone knows the day after who is the winner and who is the loser. Today it's a completely different situation. We are fighting against terror and guerrilla organizations. You know it by heart from studying Vietnam and other wars in the world. Our main enemies are proxies, are not really real actors. We are not fighting against Iran, we are fighting against proxies of Iran. And when we are going to a military campaign, when we had a military campaign in Lebanon in 2006, it was against Hezbollah, which is between hybrid organization, between terror organization and guerrilla organization. When we are fighting Hamas, it's a terror organization that also has kind of abilities of guerrilla organization. And actually, it's not about power. It's not about military capabilities. It's about creating the consciousness of winning. How you convince your own people and the other side that you actually defeat them. And why is that why it's so important? Because if you finish a military campaign and you actually achieved everything, and in the day after here in the parliament, which is, as you understand, democracy, strong democracy, we debate with each other every day. Here in the parliament, in our parliament, if in the day after we are going to doubt the achievements of military campaign, it's actually changed the whole meaning of winning the war. And sometimes, from military perspective, the army here, the IDF, can achieve unbelievable achievements. At the same time, from civilian perspective, it can be a disaster. Now, it also means that it's not only about killing the mass of the enemies, destroying the mass of capabilities of your enemy. It's also about, it also can be about one picture, a winning picture. If you can put the flag in the right place, if you can convince the civilians here in Israel and the enemy that you actually defeat them, if you convince the international community. Because if you, and I had experience in different military campaigns that we did the right things, but at the same time we found ourselves in a sensitive, more complicated situation 2 weeks after that, just because we missed a target and we had some civilian target in Lebanon or other scenarios, which can happen, as you know, in a military campaign or in a war. And I think that one of the aspects of being a Knesset member, a parliament member today in Israel, is first of all to understand that we, even though Israel, I think, is the most flourishing country in the Middle East with the strongest economic conditions and for sure the only democracy here, with high-tech, with different many achievements, even though it's not a normal place. In 2 years, 3 years, we can find ourselves, even in 1 month, we can find ourselves again in a military campaign. A Knesset member, a parliament member like me can find himself risking his own life, and I have 4 kids, so I don't like to risk my life. I grew up since I was 18, and I was very happy to join every military operation or whatever, and fighting against an enemy, a clear enemy, but at the same time fighting about the narrative, which is more complicated. Fighting the enemy, it's easy. Sending troops, sending aircraft, sending, I don't know, commando units, whatever. Fighting the narrative, it's much more complicated. Because the army cannot influence my opinion. It cannot influence the discussions that will take place here the day after. It cannot influence the media. It cannot influence what the headline of the New York Times will be the day after, and also what the headline of Wall Street Journal, if we are taking to both sides, will be the day after. And this is part of the problematic situation. And for me, as Israeli, as Zionistic, as someone that believes in Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, for me, one of the challenges is, first of all, to feel that we are doing the right thing. It's not about to feel how, it's not about educating ourselves how to do a military campaigns. It's not about educating our soldiers about different military maneuvers. It's about educating ourselves that we are doing the right thing. First of all, to convince ourselves, hearts and minds, but for here, inside our home, first of all, and then to spread it out. Now, after I said that, which coming from your world and my, as a hobbit, I can say, I can tell you that I'm very proud to be part of this house, even though that we have, as you know, different debates and different opinions and views about what's happening in Israel, and right now we are in a political crisis. Still, the ability to talk, to argue, to fight politically with each other, I think this is what makes Israel such a strong state with such a strong abilities to This is ours. With יהודה, תבדוק באמת אם such a strong democracy that actually helping us to strengthen us economically, militarily, politically, and from other aspects. I would like to recommend you not to see Israel through the current situation, political situation. It's part of the Israel democracy. It's part of our democratic character and part of our challenges. I'm saying that, and I'm going back to our starting point. Being democracy, giving you a lot of tools to help yourself, to strengthen yourself, to develop your own country. At the same time, militarily, it's giving you a lot of limitations when you are fighting against terror and guerrilla organizations. And the balance, it's all about the balance. It's all about checks and balances. It's all about how you, in one hand, understand that your mission is to defeat your enemy, to protect your own country, which is the IDF is actually an army that established to protect Israel. And at the same time, you understand that you are also part of a political arena. And if a soldier, one corps is doing the wrong thing, actually, in the day after, it can be a headline in the New York Times or another newspaper, and 2 days after that, it can be a discussion at the UN, one of the UN committees, and 3 days after that, it can be one of the most influencer people in Israel for that year. And we had experience also in that matter. Checks and balances is to find ways to keep your own security needs and at the same time your liberal values. If you have a checkpoint, for example, here in Israel, when we are trying to supervise people that crossing the checkpoints to work in Israel, how you balance between your security needs to make sure that no suicide bomber is crossing the checkpoints, and at the same time how you give maximum ability to Palestinians, for example, to cross and to work and to make money and to bring money back home. Checks and balances is between our national character and at the same time our democratic character. And it all comes to a very small dilemmas. Sometimes it's dilemmas that you have in a campaign, in a military campaign, when you have a school, that you know that kids are actually has become a human shields and protect terrorists that launch rockets against our own citizens. It can come to another point when you have a debate inside the UN between different actors, countries that criticize Israel for taking military steps. It can come also to internal politics inside Israel, which happens day by day. What I try to say shortly is that this is a very complicated state with a very sensitive, with a sensitive approach to balance between different needs and interests. I had the opportunity to teach at university some courses about Israel, and I always said that if we are as Israelis still trying to understand who we are and how we are doing that, and what does it mean to strength checks and balances, and what does it mean to keep our moral values at the army, and at the same time to make sure that our security needs are fulfilled. What does it mean to be an Israeli, a national state, and at the same time democratic one? So probably no one else can understand what is it Israel exactly. So the only conclusions that I have, the only conclusions that I can share with you to summarize my short briefing is that you will not understand Israel completely, but the only thing that you can understand that our wills and visions, and this is to be a symbolic society, to be the only Jewish state which keep on liberal and democratic values, to make sure that our soldiers, civilians, leaders, politicians understand that security and values are going together if we want to make sure that this miracle, as I see it, the state of Israel, still flourishing and strengthening ourselves, and the Zionistic vision to create a Jewish state, a democratic one, will remain here for many, many years.
Amazing.
So this is my short view, and now you can ask whatever you want.
Thank you very much. Questions? By show of hands. Here we go.
Sir, I'm Santiago Lopez from Virginia Military Institute. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. You talked a lot about fighting the narrative. How do you go about dealing with that, the internal conflicts here, like the riots in Jerusalem yesterday?
Okay, this is first of all, it's complicated, as I said. I don't know how to control the narrative after a day like yesterday. But I can tell you that I can try to control the narrative in a military campaign in Gaza, for example. In the Second World War, I'm sure that you know about it, but the US military recruit different film makers in order to create a narrative. I think 6 of them. There is a nice movie about them, how they actually create the American narrative in the middle of the war. Now, in those days, it was quite clear. You had your enemy, you had your own people, your allies, and the first one that actually put the flag or defeat the enemy was the winner. So we knew exactly, the Americans knew when they were, when they achieved the mission. They were in Berlin. It was very easy. Today, it's less and less easier. I think that the American military, or you actually saw that in Vietnam, while you had unlimited power, military power, at the same time you had dilemmas with legitimacy outside and inside, which influence not less than military capabilities. Here we have the same problem. We have a very strong army, the most strongest army in the Middle East. We have a small guerrilla organization, and at the same time, it's not about military capabilities. It's about criticism from all over the world. It's about sometimes hurting uninvolved people, which happens in military campaigns when you try to shoot someone that surrounding himself in a civilian area. Sometimes mistakes happen. It's about convincing people here in Israel that the price is worth. It's about telling your people and countries outside what actually you have done in a military campaign, which is very complicated to explain. Sometimes no one can understand if he is not with his own boots on the ground. And the most important thing, and I'm sure that you study it in your education process, is that in asymmetric wars, one side, the weak actor, can actually use unconventional tools. And I'm not talking about unconventional weapons, I'm talking about unconventional narrative. He can actually fake whatever he wants. He is not an actor. We had experience in 2002 that we saw a funeral of kids in our air vehicle that actually pictured it in Jenin, one of the Palestinian cities. They blamed the IDF to kill those kids. So we have the movies. They followed the funeral. It took something like 10, 20 minutes. And after one of the corners, suddenly you see the bodies jumping from those beds and start walking or running. So, and nothing happened, because if in unsymmetrical information war, you can lie and it's okay if you are the weak actor. If you are a state, you cannot lie. Or you cannot lie officially, let's say it like this. So it's also about tactical narrative, but also strategic narratives. How you convince the international communities that what you're doing is the right thing, or how you convince them that you had no other options than to launch a military campaign in order to protect your own people. How you find ways to convince the other side that it's not worse to continue with these wars, because if you take, for example, the last campaigns in Israel, it's not about conquered territory. It's about conquered the minds and hearts of people. How you convince them that the price is heavy enough to stop and to have a ceasefire. It's not about defeating as we knew in the wars in the past. How you convince your own people, how you convince the media. So it's becoming more and more problematic, and sometimes you can use the same trick from the World War II and to make sure that you have enough cameras, pictures, people, filmmakers that understand that it's not only about shooting, it's not only about the M16, it's also about the pictures that you take in the middle of the campaign. And I know that you have enough forces that doing that, but it's also a challenge here.
Other questions? Yes.
Good morning, sir. My name is Cadet Travis Afuso from the United States Military Academy, and I'm originally from Hawaii. I was wondering if you could share with us a particular experience in your life that has contributed to developing you into the leader that you are today.
First of all, I served in the army for 6 years, a little bit more. And I had a lot of experience losing friends in different military campaigns, understanding the price of wars here in Israel. And don't forget that here in Israel, everyone has to go to the army, have to serve in the army. There is no other option. And you find yourself, I would say that what mostly shaped my views is to meet actually mothers of friends of mine that lost their life in military campaigns. And I always says that if you, bogies that you just spoke with him, an officer like that had so much experience, not in fighting it's okay, it's not that problematic to fight, we know it for many centuries. To meet mothers and to tell them that their kids lost their life under your ship, and it's part of your responsibility, it cannot leave you ever. And actually, someone that find himself in those kind of dilemma create, or I would say is carrying a baggage that no one can carry. And it forces him to become a leader. It doesn't matter what kind of a leader, but it's part of it, convert him to leadership without any connection to what he is doing and what he planned to do and how he's doing that. He has some kind of responsibility over his shoulder. You know that part of the Israeli tradition, that after the military service, a lot of Israelis are going to South America, to India, to different places in the world for a long trip, a backpacker's trip. The majority of the Israelis that serves in combat units are going to long trips all over the world. Not to the US, it's quite, it's quite a normal and sympathetic area, but to areas like South America and India, I don't know, or other places. I also, after a long military service, I spent 1 year in Latin America, and I think that part of it is to try to convince yourself that you don't have responsibility on your shoulders, and what you see and what you have done is not anymore part of your character. It can never leave you. And if you ask me how you shape leadership here in Israel, part of it is to be part of this Israeli narrative, part of the Israeli responsibility for life of other people, to understand the price of living here, the advantage of living here, and I love my country, but at the same time the price that you pay for keeping Israel as a Jewish and democratic state.
Other questions? Yes.
Sir, my name is Cadet Matt Montero from West Point. I'm originally from New York. I was interested in what's the final end state for Israel. Israel's been in conflict since its inception and before that. Militarily, they've switched from being defensive to now one of the strongest forces in Israel. So primarily, what's the political end goal with the strong military that you guys have now?
Look, we educate our own kids on peace, telling them or giving them some songs about peace, telling them about the prophet of peace one day, how we believe in a utopic world. When you grow up, and if you're taking a political conservative point of view like mine, unfortunately you understand that there are more limitations and possibilities, and you need to minimize conflicts and not to believe in some kind of magic sticks that will resolve everything. Unfortunately, Israel, as I see it, is the front of the clash of civilizations in the world. As I see it, here you can see the clash between democratic values and other values. We are surrounded by dictatorships. We are surrounded by destable countries, states. We are surrounded by values that maybe can fit to the dark ages and not the modern periods. And we need, first of all, to recognize it and to try to minimize it by using interest, not by using dreams. I cannot tell you that my kids will not go to the army. My kids, I have, as I said, 4 kids. The youngest one is 4 years old. He will serve in the army, as I understand it. My wife always telling me that she doesn't want to think about it, but this is part of the price of living here. I cannot give you some vision about how we limit or how we deleting conflicts in this area. Unfortunately, I think that we will have conflicts in the future. What we can do is to find ways to think strategically about the future, not politically. Sometimes we think politically about problems that we have. Gaza Strip, Lebanon, Palestinians. We need to think how we actually minimized the risks, which is actually risk management. And this is what we are doing here. Sometimes risk management works, sometimes it's not. I hope that we will not have many conflicts in the next future, in the close future. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you that this is what's going to happen.
Other questions, if there are? hello, sir.
בסדר גמור.
Take one more question?
בוא, שב.
אתה יכול לקחת עוד שאלה?
כן, כן.
We'll take one more question, please. Anyone has a question? Yes, Isaiah.
Sir, Isaiah Sampson from United States Air Force Academy. Grew up sometime in Florida. My question is pertaining to this new non-conventional warfare that you and here in Israel and America is facing, as far as, not necessarily being able to have the tactical advantage because the laws of war that are common. I'm wondering, how do you start having the discussion on what is the solution to gaining that tactical advantage back, or what is the solution to fighting these new styles of wars properly?
Look, I'm sure that you have many lessons about small wars and about asymmetrical wars and how you dealing with those dilemmas on the ground. This is not new in the world, not for us, not for you. I think that since, as I said, Vietnam War, Afghanistan for the Soviets in those days, for us Lebanon, for many countries, for French Algeria, people found themselves in unconventional, unpleasant situation, military situation. The only thing that you can do is, first of all, to, as I see it, not to throw away the definition of defeating and winning. I think that if you start talking about only about limitations and not about possibilities, you lost from day one. What we can do is to find tactical tools, first of all, to fight in those two dimensions that we talked about, and then to find strategic tools to make sure that those kind of wars ending in achieving something. It can be a ceasefire, it can be deterrence, it can be also convincing different actors that you took the right step. Since, as I said, we are in a realistic area, and I have a realistic approach, it's not going to resolve everything, but it can help and actors like Israel to maintain the security here and to strengthen the iron shield that we are, and I'm talking about the idea of iron shield that we built here, and to convince our enemies that whatever they do, and it doesn't matter how strong it is and what kind of tools they use, at the end of the day, the bottom line that they will find themselves, we will find ourselves in a better situation and they will lose something. And this is the only conclusions that we can, or this is the only message that we can use in order to plan our strategic steps when we are getting to those kind of scenarios and dilemmas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.